Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Throughout the year, I've repeated this mantra. I've said, I'm not looking for perfection, I'm looking for improvement, for progress, right? I want you to get better at the skills we've been playing around with all year. And I understand that you're not going to be perfect at it. I'm not perfect, and I don't know pretty much anyone who is. So it's one of those things where I'm looking for you to just get better. So that also kind of goes hand in hand with our Romeo and Juliet review questions. Okay, so another question I've received from my students throughout the year has been, I'll say, hey, you know what? Give me a paragraph response, and somebody will raise their hand and say, well, how many sentences? That's an honest question. I mean, I understand that question. You want to know what the requirement is. You want to do it right. You don't want to write, too less of a response. You want to get credit. So I don't blame you for asking that question. But as you progress throughout high school, certainly college, we don't think of paragraphs as having a certain amount of sentences. So if you wrote one sentence, that's okay, that's not a paragraph. If you wrote two sentences, probably not a paragraph. I mean, technically, I guess it could be, but it wouldn't probably be considered that. Three sentences, you're going, yeah, you know what? This is a short paragraph. And that thinking is correct. For our purposes, for the remainder of the year, to make your life a little simpler, um, why don't we look at a paragraph being 4 to 5 sentences? Okay? What really constitutes a paragraph is not the amount of sentences, right? There's no actual like list. It's what do those sentences have in common? If all those sentences are unified, if they're all written about the same topic, then they're part of one paragraph. If the entire subject changes, now you need a new paragraph. So if you look at the directions that are stated uh, pretty much at the beginning of every one of these, um, Act 2, Scene 2, Act 2, Scene 3. At the beginning of every one of these assignments, except the latest one, the directions state that paragraphs will score higher, right, than sentence responses. And the reason for that is that when you write an entire paragraph to answer a question, you're doing a bunch of things. First, it's a more expansive exercise in writing. You're just doing more writing and you become a better writer by writing. So there's an effort component. I'm looking to see, hey, can you give me more detail? Can you give me more, maybe more names, more facts, more circumstances, right? I'm looking for more insight, more information. So usually the more you write, the more I'm going to get a sense of your thinking, and you're going to get more practice trying to articulate your thoughts, right? And that's kind of the purpose of English class, is to become a better writer by writing, by practicing. The other part of those directions at the beginning of our questions um, basically tells you that if you can correctly integrate quotes into your paragraphs, um, you're going to get a higher grade. I mean, it's really that simple. So the reason, if you're writing 1, 2 sentences with no quotes, I don't believe I'm failing you. I think I'm giving you 70s or 75s, or in some cases lower, because you really didn't say much. But if you can manage to write a paragraph response and to integrate quotes, right, you're doing great. And the reason for that is, now not only are you giving more effort and you're practicing your writing by giving me a longer response, but think about what has to go into a quotation. If you remember from September, right, there's an introductory phrase that's like the top bun of the hamburger. So you have to set your quote up, right? Now you have to select a quote and figure out, hey, how much of this am I going to cover? You need to recruit a reporting verb, right? I don't like it when you use a verb like says, or, thinks, or states, right? I like, argues, clarifies, alleges, informs, right? Like, you have to use a 5-star verb, and then you have to explain the significance of the quote. We had a little ratio going earlier in the year where I said, hey, for every line of a quote that you're gonna, use, you have to write 2 or 3 lines about it. So that's actually a lot more work. If you take a look, right, I believe it was question number 2 on our recent Not our latest one, right? Not 2.5, but 2.4, Act 2, Scene 4 questions. I believe number 2 asked, what is ironic, or what is the irony about Mercutio's comments about Romeo's absence, right? So hopefully you looked it up, you figured it out. You said, oh, okay, that's not that big a deal. That's pretty simple. I understand what irony is. Let me answer that. So here's just an example of a typical response that's really not developed. This is not a 5-star response. Mercutio believes Romeo was absent all evening because of Rosalind, but he was actually with Juliet. That is correct, but that's not really a meaningful response. It doesn't discuss irony. It doesn't give me a little bit more detail so I understand the circumstances of this. It certainly doesn't utilize quotations in any way. All right, so here would be an example of just a better response, more developed. Mercutio's question regarding Romeo's absence, quote, where the devil should this Romeo be, unquote, leads to a moment of dramatic irony. In conversation with Benvolio, he goes on to observe, quote, that Rosalind torments him so, unquote. This statement by Mercutio reveals that he is not aware of what the audience knows, that Juliet and not Rosalind is the reason for Romeo missing. This kind of irony creates suspense, heightened by the recently arrived letter from Tybalt. Does your response have to look like that? No. Does it have to be that long? No, not really. But notice what it does. It integrates 2 different quotations, not long ones. You do not want to use big, long quotes, right? But you want to weave other people's language into yours in an effort to just clarify, to be specific. So this is an example of a more meaningful response. All right, people. So anyway, if you don't remember really how to use quotations in a confident way, I believe on Google Classroom, I believe it was October 11th, was the posting. It's called Integrating Quotations. And just click on that and kind of re-up. Just kind of refamiliarize yourself with what that looks like and start popping those in. All right? Thanks, people.